Buongiorno a tutti, good morning. Welcome to the session of this APRE dialogue dedicated to the missions, rethinking the link between science and society. I would like to thank immediately and greet our panelists of today. This is a moderated dialogue with several distinguished speakers. I will introduce them one by one during the dialogue. For now, I'd like to greet them in their own languages because they are all coming from different countries in Europe. So I would say bonjour to Dr. Guerrier. I would say bon dia to Professor Carvalho. And I would also say goedemorgen to Johan Bouma, Professor Bouma, and finally to Professor Pedicchio, buongiorno. So we have, yeah, I wanted to do this to practice my previous experience of foreign languages. And I'm really glad to have you all here. I wanted to introduce, of course, the topic of today, and then I will also introduce you one by one. So, as you know, the conference this year, the annual conference, has been focusing on rethinking this link between science and society. And of course, we have decided to dedicate one very important APRE dialogue to the missions, to the mission approach that has been recently launched. There is, of course, a long work which has been done by different actors, by European Commission, of course, who has been leading this process from the idea to the really launch of the implementation phase, which is very recent. The European Parliament, of course, has contributed a lot to this creation of this new approach. And then, of course, the boards, which are today represented by Professor Bouma and Professor Pedicchio, which have been doing a huge work in these last 2 years, together with the other leading actors in the creation of this new approach. So this is really groundbreaking, wants to be really a new approach, a new way of working, and it's creating a lot of interest, a lot of enthusiasm, of course, but it's also probably a project which is really creating also a lot of questions about the methodology, about how this engagement, how this co-creation process and this collaboration between the different actors, on one side researchers, but then on the other entrepreneur, citizens, students, farmers, there are a lot of actors involved. So the discussion with you today is really trying to tell you, according to your experience, to our public, what has been happening in these years and what you think should happen in the next coming years. We don't want to probably think too far because the missions will last for this first phase 10 years, but we want to think at least to the next 2-3 years of implementation. So I will then now go to the first round of questions I would like to ask you. This first question is really an open statement I would like to that each of you is giving a contribution to, and I will start then with Dr. Guerrier from European Commission. I will read now the question and then I will introduce him. So the question is about what can you tell us nowadays is the critical aspect of the linkage and the dialogue between science and society. In general terms, what are the gaps? Good morning again, Dr. Guerrier. So Julien is the director for the Common Policy Center, and as in his role has been having an important role in the governance of the process in the whole creation and launch of the missions for Horizon Europe. So I give you the floor for these first 2 minutes. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, and good morning to all of you. It's a pleasure for me to be here and to talk about this very dear subject for me, the missions. Well, as you underlined, in a sense, implicitly in your question, science is sometimes seen as a complex subject reserved for academics and policy experts. But we do believe that we cannot actually separate research and innovation from society. This is, of course, particularly the case for innovation activities that are aimed at citizens, because the way in which these activities are going to be taken up by society, by the users, by the citizens, the consumers, others, is going to be key. But even more broadly, we believe that policymakers need to be open to debates with citizens on research and innovation policy, and sometimes to hear and take into account the different points of views that are going to be expressed by such interaction with citizens. The recent experience, of course, we all had with COVID-19 underscored the critical role of science. It has become evident that for citizens that research and innovation is essential to find the effective solutions to address this crisis and others, to strengthen also our resilience, our preparedness for future crises, and the relaunch of the European economy. So throughout this crisis, I do believe that the interest and the trust of citizens in science has been considerably increased. And that's in this context that we have been developing the missions that are a novel instrument bringing science and citizens together. Missions are to a large extent co-designed by citizens who have identified their scope, their objectives, and they are designed for citizens as the objectives are very concrete, relatively short-term, and designed to answer their most pressing and priority needs. So we have used and will continue to use the full creativity and participation of citizens, but not only in the design of the missions, but also in their implementation and in their monitoring and evaluation in order to ensure that missions continue to have a widespread legitimacy and acceptance by citizens. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Guerrier. Citizens involved also in the future. This is indeed now where the ball is. The ball is now on the playground, and indeed citizens and other actors should decide what is the actions to be taken. I will now pass the floor to Professor Carvalho on the same topic, so highlighting the gaps of this science and society relation. Professor Maria da Graça Carvalho, she was a passionate researcher and of course also a highly committed politician. She's now vice coordinator for the EPP group in the APRE committee. And she has, of course, given a big contribution to also the mission delineation in these years. And I would like to mention that she's also an active member of the Women Rights and Gender Equality FEM. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much for your kind words. And I fully agree to what was said, and I could summarize probably in one word: openness. I think that the missions should be open to the participation of the different parts of the society, all the stakeholders, and the citizens in general. Not only the usual stakeholders that are around Brussels, what we may call the Brussels Beltway or the Brussels bubble, but local and regional authorities, the private sector, civil society, investors, and we create critical mass because the missions go much beyond research. Is the research in the implementation, is the preparedness, it goes until policy making. So it's a very holistic way to look at policy making based on science, based on research, with the involvement of everyone concerned. So I would say that this is probably the main characteristics of the missions. A second point is that missions usually were designed to have very concrete objectives that citizens understand well. So to achieve this and this by such and such certain date. So objectives that measurable targets in a well-defined time frame. And this is also a tentative to make science closer to people, if they know exactly what is this research for, what is the main objective. So I would say involvement of the citizens, critical mass with having all the society involved, and very targeted objectives, and with a well-defined time frame, probably the main characteristics of missions. There is one point that I would like to have done in a different way in missions, and I think that more involvement of the European Parliament would be desirable. We don't have a formal role in the missions in the European Parliament, because it's considered it is an implementation of Horizon Europe, so it's up to the European Commission to implement. So they inform the European Parliament, but there is not a formal involvement. And I think that the involvement of the Parliament helps to arrive to the citizens, because you have more than 700 members of the Parliament from different parts of Europe, or different member states, different regions all across Europe, that transmit their the information, discuss with their voters. So it's a very effective way to arrive to people, and we are the ones that are directly elected. So something that I would change if I would now reset the design of the missions is a more formal involvement of the European Parliament in the missions.
Thank you, Professor Carvalho. Thank you for the first messages. I very much agree, of course, on what you said on the openness of the missions, and eventually also the role that the European Parliament can have being in contact with the regions and the member states in general. Now I would call into our discussion Professor Johan Bouma, Emeritus Professor of Soil Science in the Wageningen University, in this panel, of course, because of his active participation in the board for the soil and healthy food mission. Please.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you for the invitation. And I would start to say that the topic chosen by APRE is very relevant. There is a gap, I feel, between science and society. And to go a little bit deeper in that aspect, I think an important reason is that science does not produce, quote, the truth, unquote. And that is what society wants to hear, strongly affected by the social media. It's yes or no, it's good or bad. Science tests assumptions, hypotheses that they investigate with experiments, and then results are tested statistically, as we know, to see if assumptions are correct. That's never 100%. There's never an absolute truth. If it is 90%, for example, it means that in 10% of the cases, the results of the experiments are not true. When I explained this to a non-scientific crowd in the United States a few decades ago by now, the reaction was, those guys don't know what the hell they're talking about. What is the lesson? Top-down academic language does not come across. But how about the gap? It is still there. How does the mission concept help here, and I do think it helps very much. When establishing sustainable farming systems, that's the focus of the mission of Soil Health and Food, we suggest to work in living labs, where we start with the farmer, not with the scientist, who listens first and proposes solutions and experiments in a co-learning process with the farmer. And what is true for the farmer is true for every other type of land user, I should emphasize. There is never a single magic solution for the best management, the truth, so to speak, but only a series of options, balancing different conflicting ideas, again derived by co-learning. The farmer decides and the land user decides which option is best for him or her. He is in charge, not a scientist. And that means that scientists will need a fundamentally different approach to their work, with the great advantage that they finally obtain freedom to operate, which they now often don't have because they're linked with one side of the discussion. I feel that the mission concept is essential to achieve progress on sustainable development and also in reducing the gap between science and society. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Bouma. And I now want to give the last round to Professor Pedicchio. I don't see her on the screen. She's the president of the National Institute of Oceanography and Experimental Geophysics, and of course here as a member of the board of the mission Ocean, or should I say Starfish.
So thank you very much for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be with you here. Now, this aspect of people involvement, I could say that it has been the main lesson that we learned during these 2 years experiences, because the Commission was constantly telling us you must co-design with people, you must co-implement with people, you must co-evaluate with people. We were also laughing among us, saying also the taxi driver must understand what is emission. So it was a sort of joke. But finally, I realized that this is really the key for success. Either we will be able to involve all citizens, at all levels, kids, elder, professionals, taxi drivers, fishermen, and so on, or we will not get any success. I would like also to remind that the notion of mission has been prepared, scientifically prepared by Mariana Mazzucato, the economist, and the model that she was presenting was the Apollo mission. And Apollo mission, you remember the famous Kennedy speech saying before the end of the decade, so precise time, we will send a man to the moon and we will bring him back safely to Earth. But this was a speech that was involving all society, all citizens became part of this huge project. But it was involving scientists, but it was involving business people, it was involving the innovation world. So it was really creating this global emotion and involvement. And this is what we will try to do with the 5 missions. Not so easy, but we must absolutely do it. Thank you.
Session, which is really trying to explain to the society why the missions, and in very open and clear terms, what does it mean and what is the call for actions that we are launching with this new phase for the mission. Dr. Guerrier, can you say in a few sentences why missions really talking to our public, which is an heterogeneous public? We have also students following the conference.
Thanks a lot. Yes. Well, we just heard about mission Oceans, for instance, which is about restoring our oceans and waters. When we think of those objectives, it's obvious that these are objectives that cannot be achieved without the legitimacy and involvement on the side of citizens, as I mentioned before, and we discussed in the first round of questions, but also without the involvement not only of research and innovation, but of many other actors who will on the ground deploy the results of research and innovation. We don't just need the technologies that will enable us to clean our oceans, our soils, to establish 100 climate neutral cities by 2030, etc. But we need to actually implement them on the ground. And that's why the missions are coming here to join the dots and bring together research and innovation across a very broad spectrum with concrete programs at European level. For instance, the common agricultural policy will be key to ensure that we purify our soils and have healthy food produced. The Connect Europe facility will be key as well to develop clean mobility solutions for the climate neutral. Environment, European programs will be involved and contribute to the missions. So the missions are instruments that are spanning across the whole spectrum of government approach, including, by the way, regulation, legislation, to ensure that we can deploy those innovative solutions, and that will require also cooperation between the various levels of governments at European level, at national level, at local level. Obviously, for the climate neutral cities, we will develop climate city contracts where the cities themselves will play a crucial role. So that's why we believe that we need those new instruments, the missions, in order to ensure that we have concrete objectives being set by citizens, where they can contribute, and where we have platforms that enable us to work together to deliver on those objectives, from research to the actual implementation of those results of research, and with the coordination of all levels of government, from the local to the European level.
Thank you, Dr. Guerrier. Very convincing messages and very interesting already experiences on the ground. We will talk during our dialogue on more experiences which have already been happening on the ground with local communities. So thank you. I know that as Professor Carvalho has to leave in a few minutes, I wanted also to give her again the floor to share with us another message. And I would like to ask her, yes, I see that she's still there, what is for her, according to her, in her role on the European Parliament, the way or the strategy or a very specific activity that European Parliament could do to really make the missions and the mission approach trusted by citizens, society in general. So the floor is for you.
Yes, as I have said in my first intervention, the European Parliament has an important role of connecting with people, because we are members of the Parliament all over Europe, from the Reunion Island to the north of Finland, and we can spread the message. So it's important to have the involvement, also because of that, to have the involvement of the European Parliament. Another important role of the European Parliament is we are the big defenders of the larger budget for research and innovation. When we compare in the negotiations of the budget with the Council and with the proposals of the Commissions, we are the institution that have always a more ambitious proposal for research and innovation. So when we have a formal role, it's always a better deal for research and innovation, because we push for more ambitious to the research and innovation. I'm also, for example, recently the rapporteur of the public-private partnerships, and there the European Parliament has a formal role, because they are based on the articles on the treaty that make the European Parliament to have a formal role. So it's the partnerships under Horizon Europe, and we managed to include there a text that opens the way for an increase of the annual budget in the scope of Horizon Europe. So it's just an example. But let me finalize saying that this idea of missions, we have formally set 5 missions, but there are other things happening in the field of research and innovation that are in certain way shaped along the mission concept. I think, for example, the development of the COVID-19 vaccine, the mRNA vaccine, in certain way was an example of a mission, because we put all together efforts at member states, European level, partnership with the third countries, and there was a task force to develop the vaccine in a very short time, with a very target and very well-defined objective, and this can be considered a mission, and it was very well understood by the citizens. I think that I'm of the opinion that very few positive things came out of this crisis of the pandemic. Probably one of the few that we can consider positive is that citizens understood the importance, or the majority of citizens have understood the majority of science, because science has gave the solution, or the possible solution, we hope, for the way out of this crisis came from the vaccines, from the tests, from the medicines that are still under development, and the solution rely entire in science, and this was quite well understood by the citizens. Another example is another partnership that has recently developed the first ever malaria vaccine, first ever in the world, that was just authorized by the WHO, and is also a partnership sponsored by the European Commission with member states and African countries, is the EDCTP, and is not considered a mission by itself. It has been a public-to-public partnership, but in reality, as the concept of mission research and innovation is a target objective, well-defined timetable. People understand very well, both in Europe and in African countries that are involved, the importance of this research. They get involved, and this concept is not only on the formal missions that we are defined, but is a way to be in science in an open way, together with the citizens, together with all the parts involved, that we hope that is going to be followed also by the member states, by the foundations, and this is an example to follow, not only a funding mechanism, but an example to follow. And thank you very much for the invitation, and I'm sorry that I leave you, but in today's plenary day, and so the agenda is changing all the time. Then thank you for the invitation.
Thank you, Professor Carvalho, really, for being with us, and thank you also for these last words you gave us, because it's showing really a positive already impact of what missions approach will try to do and implement in this next phase. I also think that the missions, even if they are now just being launched, but they already had an impact also at national level, because I think that it's a very now used word. It has become again very, very popular, and also at national level, funding programs are using the missions approach already in their funding programs for research and innovation. So I think that really missions is already a winning approach. We can see it already, and we can say it already now. So thank you, and goodbye till the next occasion. Have a nice day. And now we can continue with the missions and the society with Professor Bouma. I would like to ask him, going again in this dialogue with also our audience, can you explain why do we need a mission for soil and healthy food? Try to impress us, to inspire us or scare us about why we need to do something.
Right. Thank you. Well, that's a very nice challenge, I suppose. Well, in our report, we state that 60 to 70% of the soils in the European Union are degraded and unhealthy in various ways. But if we are honest, we have to say that we know what to do about it after 100 years of research, crop rotation, shallow plowing, manuring, etc., etc. Too many farmers don't apparently follow the scientific advice. Now, are they stupid? No, certainly not. I think one problem is that scientists often focus only on their own profession and don't realize that farmers run a business and are strongly affected by socio-economic processes. And this also very much applies to all land users, and not only the farmers. So don't forget now that farmers are asked these days to satisfy at least 6 goals: not only produce healthy food, but protect water quality, reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and bind carbon in soil for climate mitigation, and preserve soil health and biodiversity. It's an act worthy of a circus artist keeping 6 balls in the air at the same time. These goals correspond, and I think that's very important, with some of the 17 United States Sustainable Development Goals that are central in the mission, and not to forget the European Green Deal that guide the missions, and they have been approved by our governments, their official policy. This is important because so far, sustainable development was a very vague concept, a little bit like mother love and apple pie. Everybody was in favor of it, but what did it really mean? And farmers and all land users like to know what is expected of them so they can plan their future activities, which sometimes involve big investments. So in summary, we have 2 reasons why we need this mission: to truly connect land users in living labs with the researchers, and to provide specific goals. These goals are reached by providing so-called ecosystem services. Ecosystem services are services delivered by the ecosystem to mankind, if you like. They are in line with the various SDGs and they are achieved when proper management is applied. You can say resulting in keeping the 6 balls into the air. So I think we very much need this mission approach to have success in the real world. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Bouma. So I would really also ask the same question to Professor Pedicchio about explaining to our audience why we need this mission for oceans and in general river and water.
So you said very well, Caterina, that the mission is related to the hydrosphere. So it's not only seas and ocean, but the inland water, lakes, rivers, and so on. So it's all the water system. And we absolutely need to take an holistic approach. So holistic altogether. And why a mission on the water system? The answer is very clear, and I think that the majority of citizens has understood it very well. Our world, our planet is a blue ball. So the water is covering 75% of our Earth. And all these seas, waters, and so on are essential for the well-being and health of human beings. Probably after the COVID experience, we've understood much more the relation with nature and humans. But why so important our seas and oceans? For many, many reasons, but everybody has understood. Also, if they do not live near the sea, all the economic activities, tourism, energy, transportation, food, aquaculture, fishery, but then mainly the role of waters in the support to mitigate climate change. The seas is absorbing a lot of extra heat that is arriving to the earth, but also, and also kids now have started to understand that one breath that we do out of two comes from the sea. So this blue bowl is essential for our life, economic life, but mainly for our health. And what has happened? What has happened is very clear. We have in front of our eyes, the human beings have been able to overexploit, to an incredible overexploitation of these marine resources. Our seas, rivers, lakes are polluted, not only of plastic. There are many different kinds of pollutions. We can assist at a disappearing of many marine species. Biodiversity is really at a very worrying level. So all these things are happening, and we need to act now to stop this process. So the mission is clearly saying we must regenerate. So this is a key word. We must regenerate what we have contributed to destroy. And in the missions, there are clearly indicated the actions, what to do, when to do, who has to do it. So this is very clear in a measurable time. So in 2 years, we will have to do this. In 10 years, we will have to do that. And we have all the verification point during the time. So the message is clear. Our life depends from the water cycle, life and well-being.
Thank you, Professor Pedicchio. I'm very convinced as a citizen by your words. And I think we should all just do something to contribute to this huge mission. And if you allow me, I would also like to continue a bit with you and with your experience on the mission Ocean or Starfish, because I would like to now talk about engagement of stakeholder and what was happening on the ground already in these last 2 years of experience of you in the board. And I will also ask the help of our colleagues here in the studio to show you, while you talk, some photographs of the experiences you will share. So please, just in a couple of minutes, a few of your experiences really on the ground.
So here you can see Martina, the starfish. This is a picture that has been done by the famous writers. She's Nicoletta Costa. If you have small kids, you probably know her. She's very, very well known with the kids, and she's preparing this booklet for 4 to 6 years old kids that we will distribute in different schools and different contexts, probably also at international level. And here is the character, as you can see, the starfish that was a symbol of the mission. Starfish, each arm is indicating one objective, but arms are related to the body. That means a synergy. And this Martina is going to catch plastic under the water with the support of kids. So there are these adventures together with games and with laboratory for kids. So this is one example. The point is that we must involve people, as we said, but we must emotion people. We must capture people's imagination, and we have to develop our communication techniques and languages according to the kind of audience we have in front. And what we are trying to do, but many of the countries that were involved with the mission are doing the same, we are differentiated the kind of communication according to the audience, but with a common message. So we have seen kids from 4 to 6. This is a way to reach them. These are kids from 7 to 13, a big program that is putting together sportive activities. Sailing, in this case, is done with sailing yacht clubs in Trieste, sailing with environmental education, with a lot of information about the mission, about seas, ocean, and with ethics. So sport, ethic, environment, together in a very friendly atmosphere. And this project got a prize at the national level. And then these, I like very much to show these experiences, a recent one, if we want to reach citizens. So we said kid, then students, but if we want to emotion, to involve, capture imagination of citizens, what is better tools than art? Science and art. This is an incredible, powerful tool. So this is a part of an exhibition that is called From Hell to Paradise, a trip in the Plasticocene. So it's clearly related to the terrible situation of plastic pollution, and is a trip with three different artistic situation, with a hell, all black, with pet oil and so on. And then you have the purgatory, where we are now, actual situation, then hell, and then the paradise, where we can reach if we will be able to act in a responsible way. There are all these panels with reuse, recycle, and so on. And this is emotionally involving, and we put together the artistic exhibition with some, again, laboratories for kids that has been done with environmental associations. So kids were playing on one side, and then there were these explanations with scientific explanation, but so it's a mixture. Science is explaining, but then there were also some sentences from Dante. There is a celebration of Dante this year. And this is a very good model to involve people. This is a hell, when you enter into hell. And the message is that each of us, each of you can make the difference. So each is responsible in his small part, but his small part can become the main aspect for a general, important global regeneration. And the exhibition will be at Silogy next week in Ferrara. Then it will remain, this is paradise. Then the exhibition will remain in Ferrara in the museum. And then next year we'll move to Venice with the Ca' Foscari University. If you want more information, I will be happy to send to you. Also, we have a booklet with explaining all things, and it is having a great success. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Pedicchio. It was really interesting, and I was very fond of these stories, these mission stories you told us. I really think that art and culture have been one of the strong emotive and activating forces in society. So why not to consider also art to reach the objectives of missions? This is also an interesting message. I would also like to ask to Professor Bouma about his experiences on the ground. He's in a totally different field, but dealing with different actors. Can you tell us some of your experiences as in your life of a soil scientist or board member for this mission? About lighthouses, what were your experiences up to now that you can share?
Well, first of all, I would very much support what was said by the previous speaker about communication using art. There are many examples in our work and the soil work where this has also been done. Extending to young people is particularly very important, and I think these are very important initiatives. Now, the original question I received was, who drives the vessel? We have all great plans, but how do we really get success on the ground? Obviously, we have to be awareness of a large group of people, the citizens, and there are very nice initiatives, as you have heard about, but we should have also specific information in order to also for the policy arena to get specific results on the ground. And I had prepared a remark on that because when talking about the soil mission, in my view, farmers and scientists should start out working in living labs, producing options for environmental sound production system that realize ecosystem services in line with the 6 goals I've talked about, these balls I talked about. And this is true for farmers, but it's true for other land users as well. And again, they do not do so out of the blue, but in the context of the Sustainable Development Goals in the Green Deal, that is established policy. Now, this policy is also known to regional local authorities, land managers, industrials, entrepreneurs, and citizens at large, which are very much part of the picture, I agree. And this provides a common understanding of what needs to be done and why. So this whole sustainable concept becomes now framed in a way that people can recognize, only the people that are willing to do so, of course. So there's common ground. And I think it is important from a practical point of view to present these options to all these other stakeholders and listen carefully to their comments and be prepared to modify the options and add new ones. I personally prefer a two-step approach. First, work with the direct stakeholders, with the researchers, and then come with specific examples, because there's a big risk that we stay with generalities that don't have hand and feet in the real world. And that I've been in several sessions where all the parties, all these people sat together to discuss what had to be done, and that created a lot of confusion and dominance of slick, fast talkers, if you like. And I've seen farmers retire from that, not willing to join that. And of course, if we lose the farmers, we lose it all. And not only farmers, if we lose the land users, if we don't develop specific examples, and I have later an example of that, if we have time for that, and then communicate it very well, I think that's the way to go. But those specific examples, we need very much to put meat on the bones and not stay with generalities. Thank you.
Johan, yes, why don't you go on your example right now?
Okay, well, there are many examples. I think the other speakers say that a lot is going on in the world. I find it very exciting the way this is picked up. But my particular mission story would be that I was strongly involved with a successful living lab of a dairy farm. And when living lab is successful, if the 6 balls are in the air, if you allow me this comparison, then you have a lighthouse. It's an example for other farmers, right? Now, I learned 5 lessons. First of all, listen first to the farmer and the land user before to start talking yourself. Don't go right away into a right or wrong mode, okay? What might seem odd at first sight may be enlightening later. Remember, farmers are not fast-talking lawyers or actors. Learn to appreciate their input. That was 1. 2, keep looking at the whole picture of the farming system. Think of the 6 balls again. And omit the focus on certain aspects only and avoid too many details. 3, realize that every farmer has his own farming style of adaptive management, reacting to ever-changing conditions. And that is his strength. That is the strength of the profession. Fitting in with that is the secret for success. But remain critical. If trust has been established, constructive criticism is welcome and accepted, and, it must be said, is often very much needed as well. 4, use simple language when formulating the options. If you need very complicated language, you probably don't quite understand yourself what's going on, I feel. And 5, very important, and this was already touched by the previous speakers, get in touch with communication experts when communicating results. We as scientists are not good at this. There is now a lot of unjustified, in my view, negative publicity about agriculture. Successful options of soil management, keeping the balls in the air, once again, qualifies lighthouses, as I said before, that are an example for other farmers operating on the same soils in the same regions. But proud and independent farmers will never completely copy what is presented by one of their colleagues in a given lighthouse, but they will certainly pick up aspects they can use. And I'm very excited about this particular prospect of knowledge transfer and knowledge communication that is very much part of the core of the mission concept. Thank you.
Also very interesting, this element on how to communicate, how to engage. You talked about farmers and land users. It's important to choose indeed the right language and the right instrument of engagement. So this will be very, very important in the next 2-3 years of implementation in the different missions, the different projects, the different actions. We really have a big role in setting this dialogue, this impactful dialogue. So really, really important elements. And now a bit going back also to Dr. Guerrier and what will happen in the next months on the mission arena. So European Commission has been preparing, publishing the implementation phase report. There are some very interesting studies published called foresight studies, which are showing where the missions are going, what are the trends. So I invite all the followers of this session to read, to be curious about these documents, which are really important. But I would like to ask you if you can share with us some element about the participation to the missions, to the calls, which European Commission will launch, because researchers, local actors are very interested and are waiting for more clarity on how to take part in the missions, in the project, in the different initiatives. So can you tell us some anticipation or give us some details about this? Thank you.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. You mentioned rightly the 5 implementation plans which we've put on the website, so they are accessible to all, and they show for each of the 5 missions what are the objectives and how we are going to implement the actions along the next years in order to deliver on those objectives. So that gives you a very good advance information on what is going to be open for the participation, in particular of researchers and innovators, but not only. Now, for the actual research and innovation part, it will be implemented through the Horizon Europe program, following all the rules of Horizon Europe that our researchers know well. We've had a first preparatory phase with a number of horizontal preparatory actions that were issued in the work program in June. So those actions have been published. We've received applications and we are now evaluating them, and the projects will start in the course of next year. But for the bulk of the actions, they are going to be part of an amendment to the work program, because the missions were launched officially at the end of September. So we are coming now with an amendment with very substantial actions. For the next 3 years, we have a budget only for research and innovation on missions of about 1.9 billion euro. So the first tranche will be in this amendment of the work program that will be adopted before the end of the year. So the calls for proposals will be published by the end of the years, and researchers and innovators will be able to apply in the same way as they do for other research and innovation actions under Horizon Europe. Then you will have a second tranche of actions in an amendment in spring next year for the 2022 actions and budget. And then you will have the work program 23-24 for the whole of Horizon Europe, which will cover also the missions for 2023, and that will be adopted by the end of next year. So 3 phases and 3 times about 600 million euros. The first one being published by the end of this year, second one in spring, and third one at the end of next year. And of course, we'll have, as we usually do for our Horizon Europe actions, information sessions, information days on missions in January, and we'll inform the national contact points who will be able to support the applicants in each member state.
Thank you, Dr. Guerrier, for this anticipation. So the message to our audience is that there will be several calls coming out very, very soon. Of course, the message is also that missions will be realized not only by calls and financial instruments. Missions, as you heard, are really calling for synergies at local, regional, national, international level. So it will be really calling for a common joint effort of the different actors. And all should have a role in this, from researchers to the last citizen, to the last school student. It will be really a universal mission for each of us. I am going to close this very interesting dialogue with you. I think it was really fast. It's true. It was, but it was important, and it was what we were expecting. So we really wanted to inform, but also inspire our audience. We have really half a minute left. If you want to just give a final one single word, which is your ingredient, the first and only you want to launch to the public for the success of mission, but really one word, and then we say goodbye. Johan, I know that you have a good one.
Well, I had a remark about ecosystem services, which I find that appeals to quite a few people. That's fine to talk about it, but too long we have treated the ecosystem as a servant obliged to provide these services to us. We are disturbed when the ecosystem does not deliver and don't realize that it is our own fault because we followed management that did not obey the laws of nature. Rather than pretend to be the master of the house, we, and I emphasize we, rather than the ecosystem, should be the grateful and humble servant helping to achieve nature-friendly management procedures. Requires a different attitude, which is key, I think, for everything we try to do to realize sustainable development. And I say, once again, the mission really fits in there quite well. Thank you.
So your words were attitude, different attitude, and we, I think. Professor Pedicchio.
So I would also join, as the previous speaker said, that you should read the implementation plans, you should read the communication. They are very, very interesting. And for us in Italy, what is incredibly important is the initiative of the Lighthouse Initiative for the Mediterranean. So there is a strong program for the Mediterranean, mainly related to pollution, but not only, that will involve all actors. And other interesting aspects are the two enablers, what is called enablers, the horizontal enablers. And one again is communication, human capital, knowledge. And the other, I would like to conclude with this, is a digital knowledge. And this idea of building a digital twin of oceans, digital twin of the hydrosphere, will be the next real challenge in the next years. Thank you for the invitation and for this interesting dialogue.
Thank you, Cristina. And final word to Dr. Guerrier. What's your word?
Yes, if there is one thing I would like you all to remember is that missions are a new way to conduct public policy, and in this case, in research and innovation. And they can only succeed if we are all teaming together. It's Team Europe, meaning European level, national level, local level, and citizens. So the key to the success will be our capacity to work together as a team to deliver from research to implementation. And your role will be key. Your role as researchers, innovators in the audience, but also your role as citizens. An example, we will launch the Solidarity Corps for volunteers, citizens who will participate in the implementation of the missions to restore our oceans, to purify our soils, and produce healthy foods. So you will have the opportunity to participate and help us make it a reality.
Thank you, Dr. Guerrier. So I would close by saying then, let's do it together. That's really the word I would use for this mission session. Thank you. Thank you for being with us. It was a pleasure to know you and to meet you. Till next time. Goodbye.
Bye.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Ciao.
Ciao. Goodbye.